You are listening to Viewpoints from PlaceCloud. Cultural researchers tell stories of places from around the world. For the full multimedia experience and to support the creators you enjoy, visit placecloud.io.
We are standing outside 2 Willow Road, a home designed by modernist architect Ernő Goldfinger and completed in 1939. Over the course of this viewpoint, we'll consider what the structure reveals about 1930s modernism and its cross-disciplinary networks, before exploring the ways in which that early modernism has been claimed as national heritage. Goldfinger was born to a Jewish family in Hungary, though he came to Britain via Paris, as did another prominent modernist architect, Bertold Lubetkin. Through Goldfinger's work in France, he was influenced by the ideas of both Le Corbusier and his mentor, Auguste Perret, who would train Goldfinger in the use of reinforced concrete, and whose hat Goldfinger displayed in this home. In addition to those design influences, Goldfinger's Marxist views shaped his idea of the social purpose of architecture. After arriving in England, Goldfinger was a key member of the Modern Architectural Research Group, or MARS Group, which included not only architects but also critics and practitioners of other arts, including poet John Betjeman. What's special about this residence is that, as with many pioneering architects, Goldfinger was able to put his ideas into practice to such an extent because he was both architect and client. Through designing his own house, he could display his capabilities at an early point in his career. Although some neighbors feared that Goldfinger's house would be out of keeping with the character of the neighborhood, 2 Willow Road is notable for its efforts to harmonize with the surrounding 18th century architecture. We see this especially well with Goldfinger's use of brick on the exterior, in addition to the concrete frame that allowed so much of the interior to remain unobstructed by load-bearing walls. That open plan was complemented by the large windows that bring light into the space, and Goldfinger developed some of the striking furnishings in the home as well, including his pedestal desk. At the same time, this house isn't just a tribute to Goldfinger's modernism, but also to a range of creators. The spiral staircase created by engineer Ove Arup calls to mind the spiral penguin pool that Arup designed along with Bertold Lubetkin in 1934. In addition to Perret's hat, there are a variety of collected cultural objects and an impressive collection of modern art on display, including pieces by Max Ernst and Henry Moore. Indeed, Goldfinger was at the center of an influential artistic community in Hampstead, which included Moore, Ben Nicholson, and Barbara Hepworth. Some may recognize the name Goldfinger from the James Bond villain, and Ian Fleming did take the name from Ernő Goldfinger, though much of the story that circulates is more myth than fact. For instance, one version of the tale is that Fleming created a villain named Goldfinger because he hated the architecture of 2 Willow Road so much. The reality is both more quotidian and more interesting than that. It appears that it was more that Fleming liked the name Goldfinger when he heard it, but that distinctive name also caused the family to receive numerous prank phone calls, and Goldfinger threatened to sue. Writer Cyril Connolly suggested to Fleming that he should name the villain Gold Prick instead, but Goldfinger eventually reached an agreement with Fleming's publisher, and the name stood. Beyond that brush with Fleming, there are a number of lesser-known literary connections to Goldfinger and his work. One of these came through another of Goldfinger's great housing experiments, Balfour Tower, built in 1967. That was an innovative tower block council estate where the Goldfingers lived temporarily in a flat at the top of the structure. There, they hosted social events for residents, and Goldfinger received feedback about what features inhabitants did and did not like. providing valuable information to apply to his future projects. Because of that venture, scholars like Sybil Heil have suggested that Goldfinger served as inspiration for the architect Anthony Royal in J.G. Ballard's 1975 novel High Rise. In Ballard's narrative, Royal too lives at the top of the block of flats and socializes with the residents to study their experience of the structure, all as part of what Ballard represents as an experimental community, though one with the violent side in Ballard's telling. Even earlier than that, Connolly, the same literary figure who suggested that Fleming change his character's name to Goldprick, featured reviews by Goldfinger in his famed little magazine, Horizon, which regularly incorporated writing by architects and architectural critics. Goldfinger was already integrated into the group of authors who formed the core of Horizon, especially via poet Stephen Spender, the founding assistant editor of Horizon and a part of the vibrant, left-leaning intellectual and artistic community in Hampstead. The list of guests at Spender's wedding gives some idea of these networks. Along with Goldfinger and his wife were Connolly, the novelist Rose Macaulay, and the zoologist Julian Huxley, who sponsored modernist animal housing at the London Zoo in the 1930s. We thus witness Goldfinger's and to Willow Road's centrality to the generative exchanges between the avant-gardes of many disciplines which took place in 1930s Hampstead. From a 21st century perspective, what's especially interesting is how much cultural understandings of the sometimes divisive and quite cosmopolitan modernism have changed with the passing of time. As we can see in Two Willow Road's acquisition by the National Trust in 1995, following Ursula Goldfinger's death, and in the organization's role in preserving this history, the very international and iconoclastic movement of modernism has been reclaimed as national heritage. However, the history of modernism's reception is even more complex than that. 5 years before Two Willow Road was completed, Edward VIII, then Prince of Wales, gave a speech to the Royal Institute of British Architects that espoused ideas about planning and collectivism that were quite similar to the ideas of the Mars Group, of which Goldfinger was an integral part. The prince declared, "We should take a bigger and more generous outlook on the planning of our cities, following the trend of our times, which is to think less of the limited group of individualists and more of the national point of view. Through, quote, carrying the principle of mass production over to architecture and the building trades," he argued, the nation might raise the living conditions of the great majority of our people. That emphasis on the benefits of applying modern materials and methods to British architecture strikes quite a different note from the speech of another Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, as he addressed that same organization precisely 50 years later. Amid his general criticism of modernist structures, Charles singled out a proposed creation of Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, who had also been a big influence on Goldfinger. Charles described that plan for Mansion House Square as, quote, yet another giant glass stump, better suited to downtown Chicago than the city of London. Through this royal reevaluation of modernism and national tradition at a distance of 50 years, we can certainly see that architectural heritage is much more fluid than we might sometimes imagine.